Hey everybody, we're back. Part 4 here of the Run the Race series. Thought I'd change up the scenery in the background here. I've got the bikes. Thought I'd sit in front of some of the bike stuff and talk a little bit. I thought this was a pretty good time for us to chat a little bit about what I think is one of my favorite parts of this passage. Paul opens the passage with the statement of, "Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us run the race with endurance." And I want to talk about that because that's really a cool idea. Um, and I want to use a modern illustration to come back to one of the things that I think Paul's really talking about, what he's thinking about. Um, in the racing calendar, every year there's this phenomenal professional bike race. It's a one-day race. It's not like the Tour de France, which, you've got 3 weeks of racing. This is a one-day race, and it's called Paris-Roubaix, and they race from Paris, which in French is Paris, to this town in northern France near the Belgian border called Roubaix. And the race is about 150 miles long. They're going to ride this in one day, which, for most of us, that's a pretty phenomenal length. But it's not just that the race is 150 miles long. It's the roads they race it over. A lot of the roads were built literally 3,000 years ago. They're built out of cobblestones and parts. And if you've ever seen these European cobblestones, they're not like the American sort of brick cobblestones. They're these big stones, and the roads are really rough. And some of them were built by the Romans 2,000 years ago. And they're still used in a way of transporting livestock and things in heavy trucks. Well, they race these bicycles over this incredibly difficult surface to race in. And so one of the things that's really amazing is every year they run this, and it's an epic race. And I mean, it's epic in the true sense of epic, especially if it rains and you get the mud over the cobbles and they become really slippery, and you put about 200 professional bicycle racers on this, and they race from Paris to Roubaix, 150 miles, and it is one of the most grueling one-day sporting events out there. It ranks right up there probably with the Hawaiian Ironman triathlon and some of these other great, amazing, grueling one-day events. It's so hard that the 200 guys that start, maybe 50 finish. Some of them, their bikes are destroyed by the road surface. Some of them just stop because of exhaustion. But the end of the race is one of the coolest endings. The Tour de France used to end this way too, but it got too big to actually finish this way. But the racers ride into this stadium, and the stadium is kind of like a track stadium, except that it's set up to race bicycles, and they call them velodromes. Because it was part of the original name of what a bicycle was. And so it's this banked kind of racing track. And these guys come in and they race around the track 3 times, and that's how they finish. And usually if there's a small group that comes in, which is usually the case, they race around that, and then there's a big sprint. But the thing that's amazing is this velodrome, being a stadium, is filled with people. And the people that come to this are the greatest cycling enthusiasts in France. And not only those guys, but they invite every living past winner of Paris-Roubaix to come on that day and to cheer the competitors to the finish. And most of them go. Not all the time, everyone, but most of the time. The stadium has some of those guys that all have raced this race before. And as you come into the velodrome, those are the guys who are there, and they're cheering you on, cheering you to victory. And I want you to think of that. I mean, you think of this, you've raced and this race is about a 6-7 hour race. You've been on a bike for 6 and 7 hours, and you've ridden through the mud and the dust and over the most difficult road surfaces you can imagine. You're jarred and beaten, you're exhausted, and you come into the stadium. And as you come into the stadium, the cheer goes up from the crowd. And you know that a big part of this crowd are the people who have won this race. And this isn't just a new race. This race has been going on for over 100 years. And so it's got this incredible storied history and tradition. And you come in, and as you win in front of all of the people who have done this before you, and all of the people who have won and have run the course, have ridden the race you have raced. And it's an amazing thing. And that's what Paul's talking about here. When he says, let us, therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses, he's talking about all of those people who have done what we've done. Now, specifically, if you go back in chapter 11 of Hebrews, he's talking about all of those Old Testament figures. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses before, Moses, the great figures in the Old Testament, David, Elijah, Elisha, the three youths in the fire, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All of these people who lived their faith out and put their lives on the line for their faith. But, as we think about it in our faith, we can extend that. We can talk about the apostles, Peter, James, John, Andrew. We can talk about Paul himself. We can go into the early church and talk about Barnabas and talk about Irenaeus and Polycarp and all of these great first and second century figures. We can go forward and talk about some of the great saints, St. Anthony the Great or John Chrysostom, St. Francis of Assisi, even into modern times where we can talk about figures, say, like St. John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, all of these great figures from our faith who their faith defined who they were. And as we live our lives and as we come into this race that Paul's talking about, in your mind, he wants to gather this image of you're running in a stadium. You're running, and all around in the stands of the stadium are these people that have gone before, who have struggled and fought and fallen and gotten back up just as we all are. And since we are surrounded by such this great cloud of people whose lives are witnesses to the power of our faith in their lives, let us run the race with endurance. Let us understand that our entire life is this race, that we're going to run it with endurance, and that at the end we're going to have a prize. One of the things you can see in the picture here over my right shoulder, this is the jersey I won. This is a state time trial championship jersey. Now, this is the prize that I rode my bike to get. Okay? I rode and I trained for 18 months to win this thing. And it's a huge deal. And the thing that's amazing is when I talk to other cyclists and they know I have this, I get, it's pretty cool what they talk to me about and how they treat me. And as cool a thing as this is, the prize that we're talking about in this case, in our faith, the prize, Jesus Christ, and our incredible, joy in living and abiding in Him is so much greater than this single and simple jersey. So, as we imagine our lives in faith, let us imagine ourselves living such a way that all of those greats, all of those past runners, all of those past riders, all those past winners, all those guys, they're all wearing, what you call it, championship jerseys or whatever. They're all there in the stadium waiting to cheer us on. And when we struggle and when we get tired, let us remember that, St. Anthony or, John Chrysostom or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King or Martin Luther or any of the great figures of our faith who have lived their faiths out in our life, they stand and they cheer for us to run this race. So, understand you don't run alone. Not just you don't run alone in that you have a community of faith that you can join, but all of those who have gone before you run with you as well. So anyway, I hope you're doing great. I hope you have a great weekend. Sorry about getting this up late. I'll try to get the next one up a little earlier. Until then, grace, peace, and remember, abide.